Namaskar. Welcome back to the Bhagavad Gita online classes. The wisdom of Vedanta is making its way across the US. Jayaji will be touring the US from April 7th to May 4th. Let us all make an effort to make this series truly successful. If you are in the US, you can help organize a talk. WhatsApp us on +91 98202 32939. Every one of us will know at least a few people in the US. Pass the word to them. Visit vedantavision.org for the lecture details. I now request Jayaji to begin chapter 3.
सहनाववतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यङ्करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः.
It is absolutely true that if you have a deep intention of doing good and you are free from ego, you're free from selfishness, you're not doing it for a personal benefit, and you are consistent and you work hard, you work with the intellect, success has to come to you. If not now, sometime in the future it will come. That confidence we must have. And it's not only about corruption, it's about life itself. You know, like this basketball player, what is his name? Kobe Bryant. When he first started, he went through an entire summer without scoring a single point. Anyone else in his place would have given up. But he kept going. Michael Jordan was thrown out. So there are very few people, and even if you are extremely talented, like I just this evening saw a video of someone asking Kapil Dev that when he was an established bowler, he was in his prime, he was asked to bowl to a 15-year-old Sachin Tendulkar. He said, I was afraid because he's a pace bowler and he bowls to a little boy. What if something happens to him? So he said, I was bowling very tentatively. Then I saw this boy has talent. So he bowled a little faster and he flung it to the boundary. Said, my God, this boy has talent. But then he said, it is not only his talent that got him to where he was. It was his hard work, it was his consistency, it was his sacrifice. All of that put together leads you somewhere. So we are a consolidated version of our own hard work earlier. Right? In whatever field, whether you're a lawyer, doctor, engineer, whatever it is, a sports person. I'm talking sport because it's very in your face. So, it's the hard work, it's the persistence, it's the consistency, it's the sacrifice. Every day you have to say no to lazing around. You have to say no to junk food. You have to say no to hanging out with friends. And you have to use that time and effort for a purpose, for the purpose for which you are working. Now, if you don't do that, you'll be an average person like everybody else. That is the thing. I was telling someone yesterday You want to excel in the field of Vedanta, forget Vedanta. You want to do well in life, you have to wake up at 4 o'clock and study the Bhagavad Gita. There is no alternative. And I'm telling all of you this. It's not about sitting and lecturing on the Gita. For that you need much more work. But just to get on in life, to be successful, to be stress-free, to be a happy individual, you have to put in that effort. If you don't, and you think that just by coming here every Wednesday everything will be fine, no, it is not going to happen. And you have to make that effort. Every time we have lectures, like we recently had in Bangalore, now I'm telling you, I'm going to the US in April. Every one of us has the capacity of filling a hall in the US. But what are you doing? Sweet nothing. And I'm not complaining. Because you will only operate out of your conviction. No? And I am not saying this so that I will benefit. No, that's not the point. So that you may benefit. Recently we went to Bangalore for lectures. We had a full house. That hall was full. We hired the next door hall. We had to put in a lot of effort, spend money to make sure that 100 people sitting there could listen live. And that was the effort of 2 people, Vaishali and Anushka, both of whom you see every day. Both worked day and night. Vaishali sat, where had we come back from? Some flight we had come back from, and she went straight to the office and worked till 10 o'clock at night. I didn't tell her, I would not have known, but for the fact that I asked. It's not even as if she told me I was sitting here till 10 o'clock. She wouldn't have told me. But, see, that's what I'm saying. We don't work to tell others. We don't work to project to others. We work for our own enrichment. And I don't mean money-wise, please. What an achievement. 2 individuals got the whole of Bangalore, and it's not just the hall was full. After that, I went to Udaipur for another lecture. I happened to meet a couple from Bangalore, and they were telling me, oh, it was all over the place. So if, let's say 500 people came, 5 lakh people came to know that we were having the lectures. This was the result of hard work put in by 2 individuals, and that too, I'm not saying all the time, for a few days. What will not happen if all of us put in effort for the US? And please, it's not about getting people to attend the lectures. It's this morning I was talking to a small group of Canadian businessmen and telling them the power that resides in Vedanta, the power that resides in each one of us. They picked it up. And we are sitting there like, I don't know what. 100 years ago, Vivekananda said, Swami Vivekananda said, wake up. Wake up to your potential. Wake up to your greatness. We're still fast asleep. At least you must be interested in yourself, right? Forget unselfishness. You want to make money. You want to be happy. You want to be free from stress. Do something. You cannot get it by sitting there gossiping with friends. I don't know what the hell people do. You can't do it by sitting in a bar drinking. You cannot do it unless you put in hard work. At yourself. That's all I'm asking you to do. And why am I asking? Because at least you're making the effort to come here every Wednesday night. 1.5 hours you're investing here. At least reap the benefit. This is the power of Karma Yoga, the chapter 3 that we're talking about. Action beyond perform. But how are you performing the action? Is it a routine? I have to wake up and cook breakfast, so I will cook somehow or the other. Cook in such a way that nobody wants to eat. Or whatever action that you're performing, I'm not saying the action itself may be ordinary, not earth-shattering. But it is your intention, it is the attitude behind it that can be world-changing. You get it? That much you can do. Whatever you do it with your heart and soul. If it's writing an email to someone, put your damn heart into it, for heaven's sake. And your best may not be the best. It's fine. You know, when a child draws, it's not perfect. But the child draws with his heart. What is he drawing? A card for his father, saying happy birthday to the father. Nothing in that card is perfect. Even the happy birthday spelling may be wrong. But it is so touching. The parent retains it till the last day of his life. Why? Because the heart of that child is in it. The impact that your action has, where you've put your heart into it, is unparalleled. That is Karma Yoga. So, we are all running after money. How will money come to us unless you put that action with some heart in it? You know, I went to Bristol for lectures, and there's a bridge there. It's an engineering marvel. Have you heard of it? It's some 200-300 years old. And I forgot what is so unique about it. It was the first time that a bridge was built like that. And I think it's without any support. There's some engineering marvel in it. One man, one engineer, was commissioned to design that bridge and build it. Obviously, he put his heart in it. 300 years down the road, we'll go there, look at it and admire it. What made it the way it was? Here we make Ahmedabad, flyover after flyover is collapsing. That speaks volumes for Ahmedabad, right? Our own coastal road. The tunnel, when you go through, you're going as if it's a roller coaster ride. And it's not to criticize others, it's to understand that is the way we are. Are my actions perfect? Or at least, am I performing my actions with my heart? You make the bed, it's all crooked. You put a painting on the wall, it's crooked. Nothing we do is smacks of that heart in it. So, and then, what is success? Is it only about making money? Any fool can make money. You make money and then you have toxic relationships. You can't hang on to a marriage, you can't hang on to friends, you can't, everything is chaotic. Would you call that success? Then you're popping pills to go to sleep. You're popping pills to fight stress. You're popping pills to fight depression. You call that success? So what is success? Our original name of India was Bharat. Bharata comes from two words. Bha means light. Rataha means to revel in light, to delight in light. So an Indian is one who delights in the light of knowledge. And that part, one streak is still there. Do you know, statistics show that on an average, an Indian spends a far greater percentage of his income in the education of himself and his family than any other nationality. But it's not just knowledge in terms of engineering, medicine and things like that. It is knowledge of yourself, spiritual knowledge. So while other civilizations, the Romans, the Greeks, they invested in monuments, the Egyptians, they built monuments. Some of them are still there. The Indians invested in the human being. So that's how we are the longest unbroken civilization. Monuments can be brought down. Our temples were razed to the ground. Nalanda University was burned. So many things happened around us. But the spirit remained. So far. Now it's in our hands. It might go. Now the direct result, manifestation of this investment in knowledge is prosperity. So we were tremendously prosperous. There are descriptions of streets being lined with gold. Ramayana, there's a description of Dasharatha who left a golden trail wherever he went. Meaning, it just happened. Wherever he went, he left prosperity. Where is that and where are we? Wherever we go, we exploit people. Anna? Then we were rich, not just materially, we were culturally rich. Our music, our arts, our sculpture, music, dance, textiles, everything was aesthetic, brilliant. And of course, technological advancement, mathematics, surgery, science, astronomy. And the last was spiritual. So, it's about why we're talking about Karma Yoga. And Karma Yoga it's not just action. It's the intention behind the action. So Harvard study said only 15% of success comes from facts, actual knowledge. 85% of success comes from your attitude. What is your attitude towards work? And that's what makes the difference. That is what helps you to convert. See, it's your thinking. What are you thinking? You could be a billionaire, but you're thinking of pennies. Small-minded. I know the chairman of a company who used to collect bus tickets of his clerks. Not the peons who were working in his office. I was shocked. I went to his office for some work and I saw bus tickets on his table. I said, what are you doing with bus tickets? No, I want to make sure my peons are honest. I said, even assuming they charge extra. Hurry, you are the chairman, right? How much are you paid? Is your job to take care of bus tickets? Then you will achieve. And sure enough, he went in straight down. Bankrupt. The company is gone, the building has gone, everything is gone. So it is the thinking, when these guys, these financial experts invest in a company, they don't look at the balance sheet. You know where they look at? What are the promoters thinking? What are they like? What is their lifestyle? What is their thinking? Because it is the thinking that determines your future. This chairman thinks like a peon, he'll become one. He became one. You could have a peon who has a larger vision. By God, he'll get there. You should listen to videos of Steve Jobs. Right from the time when he and his partner started manufacturing computers in a garage, his thinking was big. And he said, where do you start? You don't start with the technology you have and then somehow try and get your customer to buy your technology. You start with the customer, find out what he wants. And then see if you can get your technology together to serve the needs of the customer. This is Steve Jobs talking about serving the customer. And he spoke about changing the world from that garage long before he succeeded. See the seed there. And I want every one of you to think, go back and do some hard thinking. Observe your thoughts. What are you thinking? Are you thinking whether I should see this movie, what is it? Which is whatever it is. Or not. And you're laboring over it. Or so and so has invited me to a party. I don't have proper clothes to wear. Should I go buying clothes? If this is what is consuming your head, you will remain there. Probably become a tailor. Think big, man. Become a yuga pravarta, world changer. Like Charles Dickens wrote in his book Oliver. Oliver was a boy, an orphan, who was not conditioned into limitation. So he was given gruel. The condition of orphanages in England was pathetic. So he was hungry. He went and asked for more. And that created a sensation in England. Oliver asked for more. You remember that? If you don't, please read Oliver Twist again. He was the world changer. He changed the condition of orphanages in England because one boy was not conditioned. She must have that long-term vision. Not just today, tomorrow. Not just what is my mother-in-law saying, what is my daughter-in-law saying. Rise above it for God's sake. It doesn't matter. Then you become a clear thinker. Like Swami Ramatirtha said, iron and gold will buy iron and gold, full stop. That's it. You know what that means? What will money, you're all scrambling for money. What will money buy you? What can you buy with the money that you have? You may be the richest guy in the world. What can you buy? Huh? Sense objects, right? Can you buy love? You can't even get your pet dog to love you. Forget human beings. You can't buy knowledge. You can buy books. You can buy your son admission into a university, but you can't buy knowledge. So you must understand the limitation. Like this morning, one of the Canadians asked, "Oh, your Vedanta speaks of inclusiveness. How do you face a competitor? He might wipe you out. He comes up with a technology, he comes up with a product that makes you redundant." So I said, that is part of business, right? Isn't it? Competition is part of business. Rivalry is part of business. If you don't want that, take a job in government. And they all started laughing. When you're in business, you must be ahead of the curve. When you're number one, you must be prepared for a number 5 guy to overtake you. Anytime. And how can you prevent that? Be ahead of the curve. Think ahead. Think of what people will want 50 years from now, not what people want now. What will society be 50 years from now? So, that clarity of thought you should have. And then you become steady, focused. And that's how you last for more than 100 years, 200 years. So there must be the thinking that takes you inward and upward. And then you act for that. You act now for what you think is going to happen 50 years from now, 100 years from now. You determine. You don't sit waiting for things to happen. You determine 50 years from now, this is what is going to happen. I will make it happen. That most of us are caught up with selfishness. Like, what is for dinner? As if that's the most important thing in life. Stuck with sense enjoyment as the ultimate. So you develop a myopic vision. You can't see more than 5 feet ahead of you. Confused thinking. Fickle, unsteady. Constantly looking outward for the world to cater to. So you must have a vision. Where there is no vision, people perish. All leaders had a vision, whether they achieved it or not. Mahatma Gandhi had a vision of an independent India. Nelson Mandela had a vision of getting 4 races to think South Africa first. Who else? Martin Luther King had a vision of an America without racism. He never realized his dream, but at least he had that and he worked for it. And he achieved something. What is your vision? Can't be just I want to be a millionaire. And you should read what Steve Jobs said. Imagine that man from nothing. He was an adopted child. His own mother did not want him, rejected him. She was unmarried. And he got this company that has a turnover that is greater than the GDP of most nations. And he said he was worth, I don't know what, $8 billion when he died at the age of 46. He said, right now, all that I've done in my life, all that I've achieved, all the money that I've earned is of no value. When you're facing death, what difference does it make whether you are worth 35 billion or 35,000? That realization should hit us now when things are okay, not when you're 1 foot in the grave. then it's no use. So, the real visionaries were people like Nachiketa, who went to Lord Yama for Brahma Vidya. And even when he was offered heavenly pleasures, heavenly wealth, he said no to that. Imagine a person who said no to that. How much would you fall for? Somebody gives you 1 crore. I don't know. All of us have a price. Somewhere you fall. Here is Nachiketas being offered heavenly. It's like 4.32 billion times the best in the world. And he turns his face away and says, Tavaiva vahastava nritya gite. You keep your song and dance, Yama. Teach me Brahma Vidya. Buddha, born a prince, he had everything going for him. Beautiful wife, wonderful son. Moved away from it. And had he become a king, he would have gone into oblivion like so many of the great kings. But he chose a different life. And till today, he inspires thousands of people across the world to seek the spirit. Like Sri Ramakrishna, who was sent to school and dropped out because he said, what are they teaching me? They're teaching me about the world. I don't want to know the world. I want to know God. And he got to God. So the formula is human being minus desire equals God. And you take us, the whole world is running after desire. If you don't have desire, you are manipulated to create desire. All the marketing strategies, everything is designed for that. Create desire. Create a vision among people. And the Bhagavad Gita says exactly the opposite. That desire comes in the way of your success. Desire obstructs happiness. Desire keeps you small-minded. So rise above desire. How to do that? Karma Yoga, reduce the number of desires. Bhakti Yoga, improve the quality of desires. Jnana Yoga, change the direction of desire. Simple formula. And this chapter 3 epitomizes, just puts the whole thing in one package. It's a package deal. So you must understand, before we start with the chapter, you must understand the potency, the power, the impact that your action has. Not on others, on yourself. Because we are too used to performing robotic, mechanical actions without the participation of either the mind or the intellect. There's no heart in it, there's no head in it, nothing. How do you know they're robotic? Because you don't remember. I challenge you. You wake up tomorrow morning, 1 hour later, ask yourself, what did I do? You won't remember 90%. Why? Because there is no awareness. Intellect is not there. And there's no mind. So you go brush your teeth mechanically. You might go have a cup of tea. These things you remember, but in between you don't remember. That's why we forget. Where did I leave my phone? However small your house may be, you spend at least half an hour looking for the phone, right? Isn't it? Let's see, you're laughing. Why? No intellect available. You don't know where you left it. Like this. Keys. People take the house key instead of the car key. Then they go down and find out you have to come up again. Things like that. If every action You performed with full consciousness, awareness. You know why you're doing what you're doing. And you perform it with love, with devotion, with dedication, with all your heart and soul. What an impact it will have. Simple act of making a cup of tea for someone has an impact. What is that impact? You become purer. You know, Karma Yoga is the fantastic method by which you achieve inner purification while external things get done. So you earn a living, you earn your livelihood, you do your obligations. All that gets done. And the main purpose is inner purification. You become free of desire. How? Because you fixed a higher desire. You've dedicated your entire being, your actions, to something beyond yourself. And that makes for perfection. So you should take examples. Like you see a carpenter, one odd cook somewhere, one odd chef. You find them rare specimens of humanity who just do their best. Have you seen that? A tailor does his best. And nobody else will know. Or a man who just cleans a hotel room. Who notices? But he does it. Oh, you know, every day I used to go for a walk. Every morning. Past CCI in Churchgate. And that road has many trees. And every day lots of leaves fall on the road. And if, I don't know what time that man used to come, the street sweeper, the BMC, the most ordinary employee of BMC. And I noticed he would sweep even under the cars. No other sweeper does that. And when he was done, there would be not one small leaf on the road. Not even one. Clean. And he was cheerful. So he knew that everyday walkers, and he knew what language they spoke. So if a Gujarati passed, he would speak in Gujarati. If a Punjabi passed, he would speak in Hindi. If a South Indian passed, he would say Vanakkam, something like that. And he would find a way to smile at everybody. And often I came back thinking, where does this sweeper, how does he find it in him to be cheerful about his work? All the mechanical routine, there can't be a more robotic action than sweeping the streets. How does he find it in him to be cheerful? You know, I learnt more from that man than from my morning study. And I said, that's my goal. I must find that same spirit doing my work that this man has, sweeping the street. Unfortunately, he retired very soon. So now that street is back to where it is. Amazing. So that odd person you see, you find inspiration from them. So their actions have an impact on them, but they have on us also. On the person who's viewing. I have the good fortune of having a lady at home who cooks with her heart and soul. When she first came to me, she knew no cooking. She didn't know what happened in the kitchen. From that, ask Vaishali. Everything she does, she makes tea for someone, it's outstanding. She's all heart. So, from this we learn it is the attitude. So you don't have to go, and this attitude is not taught in Harvard Business School, is not taught in an IIT, it's not taught in IIM, it is taught in the Bhagavad Gita. Which is why when Mark Zuckerberg went to Steve Jobs and asked him, I want to be as successful as you, what should I do? He did not say, go to Harvard Business School. What did he say? Go to an ashram in India. And he came, he stayed a few months, and he went back, and he is successful. Still we don't get it. You don't have to go to an ashram. Ashram has come to you. The Bhagavad Gita has come to you. Change your attitude towards your work. Whatever you do, put that extra. Like Howard Schultz, chairman of Starbucks, told every barista, means every guy in a Starbucks store who's making coffee for his customers, that the bottommost, he said, with every cup of coffee that you make, don't forget to put this very important ingredient in it. And what is that? Your heart. So from the time you walk out of here, whatever you do, even if it's a simple thing like entering your car and shutting the door, do it gently. Don't destroy the car. Do it with love. You go home, don't slam doors. It shows in every action. How you speak to people, how you... And then you will notice that you feel excited. You feel inspired. No one else has to tell you. You have to send an email to someone. Think about it. How would you want an email to come to you? If you want it to just, I have to send an email, so you will write, reference your, that's it. But you want to have an impact. You have to think. Who am I sending this email to? How do I approach the person? What do I say so that the person feels like reading, feels like taking action about it? There's a difference. Even in a written thing, if you do it with your heart, it has an impact. Why should that person read your email? It's just he can delete it. He can ignore it. He can do so many things. Why should he read it? You must think. You send a WhatsApp message. Think. At least read it before you send it. You know what happens? What is it called? Autocorrect. Right? You want to type something, it decides it's typing something else. So sometimes the most absurd message goes to a person and you've already sent it. Now, luckily, there is the edit feature in it. But before that, there's nothing you can do. It's gone. And sometimes I used to read it after sending it and say, oh my God. And type another message, say, I'm so sorry, this typo came. What I meant is this. That should never happen. And you see, tomorrow, just take tomorrow as an example. And everything you do it with your heart. Do it with full awareness. Do it with intention, with the right attitude. And see what difference it makes. Will you do that? Just try. It's about you, not about me, not about the Bhagavad Gita. It's your life. Do it and see the difference. Then you will perform karma. Because otherwise you'll say, "Arey, I came for chapter 3, you take something else altogether." No, it's part of chapter 3. It's a very important aspect of chapter 3, which is never discussed. You can go through the verses. In 4 sessions, I'll finish chapter 3. But you won't benefit from it. If you want to benefit, you must read between the lines and capture the spirit. What is he trying to say? So, the overview of this chapter is the first 2 verses. Arjuna is asking a question. He's confused. Do I follow the path of action? Do I follow the path of knowledge? Because Krishna has in chapter 2, which we've just finished, spoken of the highest knowledge. Nainam chindanti shastrani. No weapon will kill this, so on and so forth. And then suddenly he says, kill. So he's confused. Do I kill? Do I go meditate? What do I do? And verses 3 to 19, Krishna gives an outstanding presentation of the logic, the reason why you should perform action. He immediately answers his question and then goes on to give this. Then he finds that Arjuna is not reacting. So he gives the emotional motivation to act. Because Karma Yoga is a combination of intellectual conviction and emotional motivation. Both must participate. So here is Arjuna who's sitting and listening, but he's not acting. And that little emotional nudge helps. We use it all the time, right? When a friend comes over, you say, will you have a cup of tea? So he usually says, no, I've just had tea and come. I'm having, come join me. Immediately he'll say, okay. Why? Emotion works. If he is 100% intellectual, he will say, Arey, you have na, you want, you have. I don't want, I will not have. But it doesn't work. 100% of the time he'll say, okay, I'll join you. It's emotion. So he uses various techniques. And then Krishna understands that Arjuna is ready for action. So the next 11 verses is a brilliant treatise on action. Analysis of action. Verses 25 to 35. And then Arjuna asks a question again. And that's a very relevant question because he says, Krishna, I know what I ought to do. I know what is right. And I know what I should avoid. Ask every smoker. He will say, I know I should stop smoking. I know I should not smoke. But what drives me to do what I myself don't want to do? As if by force. Baladeva. All of us say that. I know I should not overeat. But I see puris and I overeat. Or I see Shrikhand and I overeat. I know I should not get angry, but then I get angry. So many things. He says, I don't need the Bhagavad Gita to tell me what is right or wrong. I know. What I want to know is, how do I stick to what is right? And how do I avoid what is wrong? So what prevents me? And Krishna's answer is brilliant. He nails it straight on the spot. Kama esha, krodha esha. It is desire, it is anger. Rajoguna samudbhava. It is born of the quality of rajas. It consumes you and it destroys you, it stresses you out. Watch out, it's the enemy. And the last few verses are how to remove these obstacles of desire. So we begin now with verse 1. Before we start, are there any questions? We spoke of changing your attitude. Nobody asked how to change the attitude. How to change? Your vision must shift from me to you, to something beyond me. Like Steve Jobs says, your vision should move from my selling to how can I provide the customer with what he wants. You see that in life, like Nike, one of the greatest, it's probably number one manufacturer and seller of shoes, high quality shoes. Have you seen any of their ads? They never talk about shoes. They're selling only shoes. Huh? What do they talk about? Excellence in sport. So, even if you are in business, you must think beyond what you're doing. See, if you are a manufacturer of toys, you must think of the children, not your toys. That's the difference. Then you will think of, is it safe for the child? Is it convenient to use? Is it attractive? Is it something that the child will take to, instead of dumping something that will hurt the child? That's the difference. And you can actually see it in Japan. During the Second World War, Japan was devastated. Completely finished. What a way they rose from the ashes. I remember in the 50s, Japanese goods were considered third rate. Engineering goods. Germans were considered number one. It changed so fast. Today, Japan is number one. You buy a Japanese car, you can forget about maintenance and repairs. You don't have to touch it till you get fed up and sell. Huh? Any other car, by the time it's out of the showroom, again you have to send it back. That applies for European cars, American cars. See, this is why once you get used to a Japanese car, you cannot buy anything else. Do you know why? Every Japanese worker thinks Japan first. So whether it is a needle or a safety pin or clothes or heavy machinery, it's Japan all the way. So that's the difference. You've got to stretch. Your vision must move to something beyond yourself. It can't be just, I want money. A doctor must think of the patient first. A manufacturer must think of the consumer first. And how much research goes into just fitting your product to what the customer wants. There must be dedication to the customer. Like Gandhiji said, customer is king. And he wasn't a manufacturer. Like that, whatever it is that you're doing, a lawyer must think of the client first. Not that how much money can I make from this fool. A homemaker must think of the family. Not myself. Every homemaker you find will talk about how much work I'm doing. I'm doing this for my kids. I'm doing this for my husband. I feel like saying, who told you to do? Yeah, stop. Don't do. So much ego, so much attention on yourself. Who wants it? Your husband will be happy eating out provided he doesn't have to listen to all this. You want a good relationship, think of the other person. Anyway, So, verse 1.
अर्जुन उवाच जायसि चेत् कर्मणस्ते मता बुद्धिर्जनार्दन तत्किं कर्मणि घोरे मां नियोजयसि केशव.
Arjuna said, O Janardana, protector of people, why do you prescribe this violent action if you think knowledge is superior to action, O Keshava, killer of Kesha? See, when you are confused, you pass on that confusion through what you say. Now, Arjuna is addressing Krishna. He doesn't seem to be sure whether he is protector of people, Janardana, or Keshava, killer of people. In the same sentence, he is using two words that mean completely opposite things. And if you look at a confused person, they usually say this, contradictory things in one sentence. But what he's asking is legitimate. Why do you prescribe this ghora karma, this terrible action? What is the terrible action? Not of killing the Kauravas, but of killing Dronacharya, the guru who taught him archery. With this archery, he is killing Dronacharya. Bhishma, Pitamaha, the patriarch of the family, who gave up the kingdom for which they were fighting. It is so paradoxical. That is what is killing Arjuna. When you yourself have eulogized knowledge. So if you think knowledge is superior to action, why are you pushing me into this? So an essential prerequisite, see the entire scriptures, whether it is Upanishads, Bhagavad Gita or any other, is a question and answer session. It's a dialogue between an enlightened master and a student who is eager to get to that state of realization of God consciousness. So, has this burning desire to learn, the student. This is called mumukshatva, the desire for freedom. Now, what happens is, in any teaching, even if it is a school, university, any teaching, the guru is at a higher position. So he sees the potential in the student. The student is preoccupied, they can't see it. Now, often you find, now that we are adults, you find a younger person or a junior person who has the potential but is not putting in that effort. And you feel like saying, come on, get on with it. There are others who don't have the potential, you leave them alone. It's true even in sport. So the top athletes, top sports persons in the world, even they have dedicated coaches. Means they hire a coach who focuses only on that person, one-on-one. In every other field, learning comes to a standstill, isn't it? You become an engineer, as long as you are studying, you learn. After that, stop. Doctor, same thing. But it must be, because if you don't do that, then you learn only by hindsight. You make mistakes and then learn. The second is, you're open to learning. And wherever there is knowledge, you pick it up. You pick up, like there's a saying, when you're green, you grow. When you're ripe, you rot. You see that in fruits. No? A raw fruit ripens and you wait for that fruit to ripen. A fruit that is already ripe, the only way it goes is downhill. The last is like Nachiketa, Buddha, and all that. They have it in them. When you're conscious of eternity, you can't rest still unless you get it. That's what Sri Ramakrishna said. What is mumukshatva? Somebody asked him. It's like, put your head under water and the desire that you have for just a whiff of oxygen, that intensity you must feel for God. Only then you get then it becomes real for you to explore and find out. So, we come down to our level. When you leave behind the belief that you can't do a thing, you leave the activity that supported that belief. You know what I mean? Like, say, for instance, suppose you believe that you can never lose weight, that you can't go on a diet. Why do you believe that? Because you want to eat. When you rise above that, you give up that and say, no, I will. It's not that I can't, I will lose weight. Then you leave behind the activity that supported it. What is the activity that supported it? You snack in between meals. You like fried food, you like sweets, you go on with that. You just leave that behind. And it doesn't bother you. So it's here Arjuna is open to learning, and he's asking, his question continues in verse 2.
व्यामिश्रेणेव वाक्येन बुद्धिं मोहयसीव मे तदेकं वद निश्चित्य येन श्रेयोऽहमाप्नुयाम्.
You confuse my intellect with your seemingly contradictory words. Tell me decisively that one path by which I can achieve the highest, Shreya. So he sets his agenda straight from the beginning. He says, I'm not interested in Preya. Preya means Priyam, that which is pleasant. The path of the pleasant is the materialistic way. I'm not interested in that, Arjuna says. I want Shreya, I want the highest. And then he says, tell me that one definite path, because he is a warrior, and that is the language of a warrior. Warrior doesn't want analysis. Warrior doesn't have the patience for saying, oh, if I do this, this will happen, if I do that, that. He wants one, attack, retreat, bust. Like in the charge of the Light Brigade, he says, theirs was not to question why. Theirs was just to do and die. That is a soldier's psyche. So he is a soldier, he is not a PhD student. He says, tell me one definite path and I'll follow it. Now for Krishna's answer, you have to come next Wednesday. Now, this has just happened. It's a coincidence. It wasn't by design. We were talking about attitude. Let's put that into action. We have the lectures coming up in the US in the whole of April. I'm going to be away. You have an opportunity of thinking one whole week to think, how can I get across to people in the United States? We're going to New Jersey, New York, Washington DC, Atlanta, Virginia is part of all. Atlanta, Dallas, Houston, San Francisco, and back to New Jersey, New York. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 places. You give it some thought and see how you can participate. So when it becomes a collective endeavor, that we all together are organizing the lectures, you see how differently you feel. Even if it is one person that you know, even if it is 5 people you know, and just think, and next Wednesday we'll tell you how you can carry it forward. For instance, her son is in New York, he's doing PhD there. In that university, he can help organize a lecture. So we are telling her what she can do. Similarly, you might know 1 or 2 people. Even if it doesn't work out, I'm not expecting anything to happen. Please don't get me wrong. I'm only saying, put in that effort. That is Karma Yoga. You understand? Will you do that? Just think. And next week, when we meet again, we'll see how we can carry it forward. Every week, we'll say how you can take it forward by 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps. And it'll become interesting. Let's take it up as a collective project. Be enthusiastic. Thank you.
पूर्णस्य पूर्णमादाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते।